so Lewis had better have a pretty good reason for believing in concrete possible worlds, except for just that it's really cool. They must explain something to be worth believing in, and remember, it can't be anything observational about this world because possible worlds are definitionally causally isolated. Another philosopher named Willard Quine said that we should believe in the existence of whatever our best theories quantify over. So if our best theories say that electrons exist, we should believe in electrons. If our best theories say that numbers exist as real objects, then we should believe in numbers. Not because it makes the theories neat and tidy, it's not wishful thinking, but because they are explanatory. There would be more questions if we didn't believe in them. Lewis was a student of Quine, and this is the direction he's coming from here. Lewis believes that concrete possible worlds explain modality. To say I might have been born ginger is just to say that in some possible world, I was born ginger. You take a modal statement and you translate it into talk about concrete possible worlds. So we know what makes modal statements true. It's exactly what makes ordinary statements true, i.e. something existing. The main advantage of this over, say, the idea that possible worlds are fictional is that whatever the relationship is between something existing and a true statement, we only need one type of that relationship. Truth is the same across all types of statements. We only need one kind of truth maker. So although Lewis's theory might seem unattractively complex in terms of the number of things it says exist, it's actually quite conservative in terms of the number of types of things that it says exist. And there's a debate there about how you should wield Occam's razor. But wait, there are more advantages. Consider the statement, if Dallas Buyers Club had never been made, Leonardo DiCaprio would have won Best Actor. This is what we call a counterfactual statement. It says that something would have happened if the facts had been different. Like a modal statement, it can't be true because of anything in the world, because it's about the way the world isn't. Concrete possible worlds to the rescue. To say if X then Y is to say that in the concrete possible world that is most like ours, except that X is true, Y is also true. In the concrete possible world that is identical to ours, except that Dallas Buyers Club was never made, Leo won the Oscar. So we now know what makes counterfactual statements true. There are supposed to be a bunch of other advantages to modal realism that Lewis discusses in his book On the Plurality of Worlds. Possible worlds are hugely useful to philosophers, but there is a big debate about whether we really need to believe they exist. It might be the case that we can get another theory to do all of the same work without being committed to actually believing in all this crazy stuff existing. But those theories are for another time. What do you guys think? What makes modal statements true? Are possible worlds concrete? Next time, we'll do part 2 of our learning about modal realism and talk about a little sci-fi film called Another Earth. Last time, we were talking about abstract objects. Joseph Cunningham pointed out that abstractum is actually the singular of abstractar, not, as I said, abstractus. It is in fact a neuter Latin noun, not a masculine one. That was my mistake. I'm sorry. Joe Morgan suggested that most of the examples of abstract objects that we were discussing could be thought of as properties. Even something like Hamlet could be thought of as a cluster of properties, which allows us to say quite intuitively that Hamlet with one word missing is still Hamlet. I presume that you would also say that properties themselves are not abstract objects. Some people think that they are. I don't want to put words in your mouth there. You might have to think about whether it would work with all abstract objects, like numbers, for instance, but yeah, it's an interesting suggestion. String Epsilon asked, what are the criteria exactly for deciding whether something is abstract or concrete? Good question. That is exactly what we were discussing, and which David Lewis thinks there is no clear answer to. Off the back of that discussion, Owen McGrath himself, Gellert Ganef, and Titus Johnson started a talk about whether programs are concrete or abstract, and whether brains are computers, which I actually have a script written about ready, so you may well get your day in the sun, you guys. Daniel Rowley suggested that if something is mutable, changeable, it can't be abstract. If it can change, then it's concrete. You gave the example of Hamlet and said that you can change the words of a copy of Hamlet, but you can't actually change the play. I'm afraid that example won't work, though, because Hamlet actually has been changed. Different versions will give you different words. Is the line, oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt? Or is it solid flesh? Or are there multiple different Hamlets, since there's multiple versions? That particular example aside, you could, of course, pursue a distinction between abstract and concrete based on changeability, though you would still have all the other problems that abstract objects present. Hillel Slot said that any abstract object could be represented as a string of digits. Okay, so what are digits exactly? Are they abstract objects? Because if they are, then you're still going to have all the same problems that we had before. This is veering into the discussion about what numbers are exactly, which is a subject for another time. Sam Anderson suggested that rather than have a dichotomy between abstract and concrete, we should have a spectrum, which is quite a cool idea. You'd still have to say what exactly are the things at the abstract end of the spectrum, though, and since there are so many different types of things that are supposed to be abstract, is there any hope of finding enough common features between them to organise them into a spectrum? Epicurus A. Greek posed a challenge to class nominalism, the position that all sets are just the concrete members, and said that if you say that two things share a property and therefore belong in the same set, then you will have to give a definition of properties that doesn't rely on abstract objects and isn't circular or trivial. It has been attempted, but you are quite correct that you do have to do that. Interruptarian suggested that concrete objects could have boundaries, whereas abstract objects stop and start. That's a really cool idea. However, most of an atom is empty space, so that will mean that the only concrete objects are atomic nuclei, or if there's space in those, then the only concrete objects will be the smallest possible particles, and everything else will be abstract, which is maybe not what we wanted. That's all we've got time for this week. This episode was sponsored by Rich Clark, Total Philosophy, Looking Glass Universe, DJ, a whole bunch of other people whose names are in the description, and the University of St. Andrews, which is really cool because not only are they the first university to sponsor the show, they are one of the best in my country, which is seriously cool. So thank you to everybody who supports the show, and if you'd like to do it in exchange for rewards and shoutouts, then you can find out how in the description.